Hello, my name is Jingo Nelly, and today we are going to be joining a Zoom class. But before I begin off, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It will bring you some good luck in your forthcoming exam. So for the Zoom class, we are going to be looking at topic 3. And under topic 3, we are going to be handling a sale contract distinguished from other types of contracts.
A contract of bailment is a contract where you have two parties, one who is called the bailer, one who is called the bailee. The bailer is the owner of property. The bailee is the one to whom the property is going to be given under certain terms and conditions. They are not standard. So the owner of property, who is called the bailer, hands over his property to another person who is called the bailee under certain terms and conditions, which vary from one person to another. But the understanding is that even when the bailer is giving over his property to the bailee, the property will revert back to the bailer. The property will return to the bailer. The property will go back to the bailer, who is the owner of the property. So that is what a contract of bailment is. You, the owner of property, you give it to somebody else who is called the bailee under certain terms and conditions to hold it under certain terms and conditions on the understanding that it shall be returned to you, the original owner, who is the bailer. I'll give two examples here for us to understand this kind of contract. One is a bank where you go to open a bank account and keep your money. A bank does not only hold people's money. A bank can also keep for you your property which you think is very valuable, and it is not safe if you kept it in your own personal house. So you can take such property to a bank and the bank will keep it for you. So you, the owner of the property, is the bailer. The bank in this example is the bailee. So Jane has jewelry. She has a lot of gold, a lot of silver, a lot of diamonds, original, very costly, very expensive. She can't keep it at home because it's not safe. Someone can steal her jewelry, which is so expensive, and she'll never recover it, which is a big loss. So John goes to her bank, Stanbic Bank, and tells the bank, you know, I have my jewelry, which I want you to keep for me in your safe here in the bank. The bank says it's okay. For that, we shall charge you this amount of money. You'll pay this amount of money every month, or you can pay per year, or for the period of time for which you want us to keep for you. So she leaves the property with the bank, and then she goes away. 2 years later, when she comes to collect her jewelry, the bank must hand it over to her because the bank is just a bailee. The bank is not the owner of this property. So when the bailer, who is the actual owner, comes for the property, then the bailee must hand over the property to the bailer. That is one example. The other example is Jane is working, for example, with Bank of Uganda. And Bank of Uganda tells her, you know what, we are going to send you for training in South Africa for a week. So Jane is renting her house. She has her car, which she drives. When she's around, she parks her car in front of her house every night. It is okay. But now she's going away for a week. The place is not safe. She can't leave her car there when she's not available. So she goes to Peter in the neighborhood. Peter is operating a parking business. Anybody, he has a big yard and he's saying you can come and park in the day, you can come and park in the night. So Jane goes to Peter in the neighborhood and tells Peter, I want to leave my car parked here for a week. When I come back, I want it. And Peter says it's okay. For that, you're going to pay 10,000 shillings per 24 hours. She leaves the car. A week later, she comes, picks the car, goes away. That is a contract of bailment. You see, the owner of the property, you're giving it to somebody who is called the bailee. This person who is the bailee is not the owner, but you're giving them the property under a certain arrangement, but on the understanding that the property shall return to you, the owner of that property. I hope it is clear. So what are the similarities and the differences between a contract of bailment and a contract for sale of goods? The similarities, one is that in both contracts, there are two parties. That one is a given. In a typical contract, there are at least two parties. So you cannot be in a contract by yourself. So in a sale of goods contract, you have the seller and the buyer. In a contract of bailment, you have the bailer and the bailee. The second similarity between the two is that there is consideration in both contracts. You have to pay. So it's not something for free. When the bailer gives the bailee property, under those arrangements, whatever they are, one of them is that there's going to be consideration. If you're going to give your property to a bank to keep for you, you must pay the bank. So you must pay. In both contracts, there is consideration. The third similarity between the two is that in both contracts, the subject matter are goods. So in both contracts, you're dealing with goods. Then the difference between the two is in relation to transfer of property. In a contract for sale of goods, like we saw, one of the characteristics is that there is a transfer of property. When a buyer buys goods, he becomes the owner of this property. But in a contract of bailment, there is no transfer because the bailer is not selling, but the bailer is handing over property under a certain arrangement. But ultimately, that property returns to the bailer. So there is no transfer of property. There is no transfer of ownership. I hope we are together. Moving on to a contract of hire purchase. But if you have any questions about bailment, please, you can go ahead and ask. So if after ending at the remedies of the unpaid seller, what are we supposed to go to after that? Remedies of the buyer. Remedies of the buyer are only three, which we looked at, but probably you just want me to repeat. One is suing for damages for non-delivery. Secondly is to recover the price you paid. And the third one is specific performance. Specific performance is a remedy that you're going to look at in detail under the law of contract. So those are the three remedies of the buyer. You can move on.
So far, that is what I've seen in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on. Contract of hire purchase. A contract of hire purchase is a contract where, again, we have two parties, a buyer and a seller. A buyer is buying goods and is paying for the goods in installments. But the buyer is given the good. You take the good, but you're paying in installments, and the property passes when the last installment has been paid. That is a contract of hire purchase. You buy a good, you take it home, but you're paying in bits over time until you've paid the full amount. Maybe you've bought a laptop. The laptop is 1 million, but you've agreed with the seller that you're going to be paying 100,000 every month. So you pay for 10 months until you've paid off the 1 million. That is a contract of hire purchase. So what are the similarities and the differences between a contract for sale of goods and one of hire purchase? The similarities: in both contracts, we have two parties. And in both contracts, the parties are the same, a buyer and a seller. The second similarity is in relation to subject matter. In both contracts, the subject matter are goods. You're dealing in buying and selling goods. The third similarity between the two is that there's consideration in both, which is the price that you pay. It is the same. It's a price the buyer pays for the goods. The fourth similarity is that there is a transfer of property in both. So in both contracts, the ownership moves from the seller to the buyer. So those are the similarities. The differences between the two. The difference between the two is in relation to transfer of property. It's a similarity, but it's also a difference. The difference is that in a sale, the property is transferred immediately, while in a contract of hire purchase, the ownership is transferred when the last installment has been paid. When the last installment has been paid, that is when the ownership transfers. It's sort of like in an agreement to sell, where you can take the good, you have the good with you, but you don't have ownership until you pay the last installment. So that is one of the differences between the two, that in a hire purchase contract, you have the good, yes, but you only have possession. So you are a buyer in possession. You become the owner when you have paid the last installment. So the position of a buyer in a hire purchase contract is that of a hirer. That is why it's called hire purchase, is that of a hirer. You are not looked at as the owner. So you're called the hirer because you're paying slowly, as if you're hiring the thing, as if you're using, as if you're just borrowing until when you have made the last installment. That is when now you can be properly called the owner. So some call you a hirer, some call you a bailee, but you're not called the owner until the last installment is paid. So that is the fundamental difference between a contract for sale of goods and that of hire purchase. Then also when it comes to insolvency of the buyer, if it's a contract of hire purchase and the buyer now becomes insolvent meaning that you have so many debts, you're failing to pay your installments every month, you're failing to raise the installments, then the owner has the right to recover the good from you, to come and take it away from you. So you lose the good. A buyer who is in a hire purchase and is failing to pay the installments will lose the property, you lose the good. So the seller will come and take it away because you do not have the capacity to continue paying the installments. And whatever you have so far paid, you cannot recover because you have also been using the good within that time. So you cannot recover the installments you have so far paid. Then still in a hire purchase contract, when you have bought goods as a buyer and you are still paying the installments, maybe you've bought a laptop, like I said, you're supposed to pay for 10 months, each month 100,000 shillings. So you've now paid for 3 months, but you feel you want to sell off the laptop and buy something else. So you, the buyer who bought the laptop under hire purchase, you cannot transfer a good title because you do not have ownership yet, because you still have 7 installments to pay before you become the owner. So as long as you're still a hirer, as long as you're still a bailee, as long as you are not yet the owner, you cannot transfer a good title because you don't have ownership. You're merely a buyer in possession. So you cannot transfer a good title. Of course, like we saw, if the exception applies, if you are a bona fide purchaser, then you can get a good title because you don't know that this person is simply a hirer. But if you know that this person is just a hirer and you go ahead and buy, the law will not protect you and you'll not get a good title. So those are the differences between a sale and a hire purchase. Pavin, if you can go back to the chat and see if there are any questions, or if you have any questions, please ask before we move on to the next type of contract.
Madam, so far I'm seeing no question in the chat, and I personally have got no question. Thank you.
Excuse me, madam. Excuse me, madam.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Excuse me. I was
Yes, please
asking.
go ahead.
Under the law of contract for sale of goods, these are the types of contracts, and we looked at some contracts in the when we are starting the law of contracts, the bilateral, the void. Those ones are called what?
We can call them the bilateral, the simple, the specialty, the unilateral, the bilateral. They are categorized under types of contracts. That is how the law categorizes them, as types of contracts. These ones that we're also looking at are also types of contracts. That is how they are also categorized as types of contracts. Have I answered you?
Yes, madam. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Contract of barter. A contract of barter is a contract where goods are sold. A buyer is buying goods and he's paying for the goods in kind. So a good is exchanged for a good. You're buying a good, but you're paying using a good for what you have bought. That is a contract of barter. So what are the similarities and differences between the two? Similarities. In both contracts, there are two parties and they are the same. In both contracts, you have a buyer and a seller. The second similarity between the two is that there is a transfer of ownership. So in both contracts, there's a transfer of ownership. You're buying a good, the buyer becomes the owner of the property. The third similarity between the two is consideration. In both contracts, there is consideration. You pay for the good. It is not given to you for free, but you have to pay for the good which you're buying. The fourth similarity between the two is the subject matter. In both contracts are goods. You're dealing in goods. So the subject matter is the same, which are both talking about goods. Then the difference between the two is in relation to consideration. It's a similarity, but it's also a difference. It's a difference in the sense that what are you, or how are you paying? How are you paying? In a contract for sale, like we saw, the consideration is paid for in monetary terms. You pay money, cash. I think you know what money is. You pay money. In a contract of barter, you don't pay cash, but you pay using a good. Someone says, I'm going to sell you a laptop, and in exchange, you're going to pay using a mobile phone. That is what we're talking about. So you buy a good by paying using a good. So that is the difference, the form of the consideration. In a sale, it's cash money. In barter, it is a good for a good. So the question is, what happens where the payment is both in kind and in cash? If you're paying using both, do we call it a contract for sale of goods or a contract of barter? What exactly is it? So in that case of Aldridge versus Johnston, it was stated that there was a contract for the sale of goods. They were buying bulls and paying for the bulls using barley. Barley is something like sorghum, if you know sorghum, something like millet. So they're using millet to pay for bulls. And the difference would be paid in form of cash. So the question was whether it was a contract for sale or contract of barter. And the court held that it was a contract of sale. So the point in this case is that where you're paying for a good using a good, let's take an example of you're buying a piece of land. The land is 10 million shillings, and you're buying for this land using cows. You say you're going to pay 8 cows. Each cow is 1 million. That is 8 million. And then the difference of the 2 million is going to be in cash, in form of money. So if you're paying for land which is 10 million and you're paying 8 cows and 2 million in cash, the contract is one of barter. If you're paying for the land of 10 million and you're paying 2 cows and then 8 million in cash, the contract is one for sale of goods. So here you look at how are you paying and which one are you using more? Are you paying more in terms of the good, or are you paying more in terms of the cash? So where you're paying more in terms of the cash, the money, the contract is one of sale. Where you're paying more in terms of the good, then the contract is one of barter. Where it is equal, 5 cows, 5 million, then you go back to the intention of the parties. What did the parties intend when they were entering into this contract? Did they intend for it to be one of sale, or did they intend for it to be one of barter? So you pose the question to the parties. What did you want when you were entering into this kind of transaction? Did you want to have a sale or a contract of barter? Then we'll now go to the contract of supply of services. Supply of services. Okay, before that, Pavin, you can please go to the chat and see if there's anything there as we move on to supply of services.
Madam, I personally have got a question here. According to the similarities, we've stated that in both the subject matter are goods, but then back to the differences, you are like under the
I don't know. I don't think I've understood your question. Are you asking about what the subject matter is, or are you asking about the consideration?
the consideration. The consideration, madam.
Yeah, the consideration in a contract of barter are goods. You buying a good and paying in form of a good. Like I said, you're buying a laptop, but you pay for the laptop using a phone. Or you're buying a pair of shoes and you pay for the shoes using a handbag. So you're not paying using cash money. That is in a barter. You exchange goods for goods. In a sale, like we already saw, you pay for a good using cash. You go to buy a laptop, you pay money. So the similarity is that in all contracts, there must be consideration. You have to pay. That is what we are saying. But the difference comes in how are you paying? In a sale, you're paying using money. In a contract of barter, you're paying using a good. But even in a sale, you can pay using a good, but the general rule is that you must pay using cash. That is what the law says. That is what the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act provides, that if it's a contract of sale, you must pay in cash. If it's a contract of barter, you pay in kind. But I went on to tell us that where you use both, you have some things you want to maybe use to pay, but it's not enough. You have to top up using money. The contract can still be one or the other. And I said you determine whether it's a contract of sale or one of barter, depending on which one is used more. And I gave an example. If you're paying for a piece of land, which is 10 million, and you're paying 8 cows valued at 8 million, and then the difference of 2 million, the contract is of sale because you're paying, rather it's of barter because you're paying more in form of goods. But if you're paying for the land, which is 10 million, and you're paying cash of 8 million and then 2 cows, it's a contract of sale because you're paying for more, rather, you're paying more in terms of cash. I hope that clarifies what you're trying to ask.
Yes, madam. Thank you, madam.
Anything in the chat?
Yes, there is. Someone is like, madam, is the sale and barter contract instead of paying for good? The person is like, in the sale and barter contract, instead of paying for goods but offered money, will any of the parties agree? That is one. Then
Okay, before we move on, I think I've just explained that now, where I said you can pay both, using both cash and in kind. I've clarified on that. It can be a sale, but you're going to pay more in terms of money, less in terms of cash. And like in terms of the good, like I said, you're buying land, it is 10 million. Yes, you can pay 8 million in cash, and the difference of 2, you're going to pay using 2 cows. That is okay. So you can use both cash and a good to pay, whether it's a contract for sale or one of barter. I hope that clarifies.
Yes, madam.
Okay, you can move on.
Then I think the next person was also asking the same question, as in, how about where both goods and money are used? Then she was like, we exchange cars and you add me some money. Then another student was like,
yeah, I think we've clarified on that. You can use both. You can exchange a good if the value of the good cannot match up to what the price is. The difference can be brought in cash. I think that one is now clear.
Yes. Then another one is like, can I use payment in installments as a difference between sale and barter contract?
Under the law, the way we have stated them, installments only apply in a contract of hire purchase under the law. the way we have stated, installments only arise in a contract of hire purchase, but parties are free to enter into contracts on their own terms. You can agree to pay little by little. That one is up to you, because you have the priority to come up with your own terms like we saw last time. The terms of a contract are determined by you. So if you want the buyer to pay you in installments, well and good. It is okay.
Okay.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah, so I can proceed.
Mm.
Furthermore, under hire purchase, it can happen to a hire purchaser who has destroyed the good when he or she is already bankrupt or insolvent.
That is not coming out clearly.
I think it was a point of addition, or I can't get it properly. Then another is like, how about paying in other currencies, like cryptocurrencies?
Under the laws of Uganda, cryptocurrencies are not recognized. Out there in the developed world, yeah, they have moved on to that, but here in Uganda, there is still no law allowing us to use the cryptocurrencies. So for now, it is still in cash. So for the other question of the hire purchase, maybe they will clarify, because they have not understood clearly what was being asked. Anything else?
Yeah, there is, but I think this is also a repetition of what you clarified back. Is this person is like, can we use installments under the contract of barter?
Yeah, I already clarified on that, because I said first priority is given to you, the buyer and the seller. It is you to make your own terms. It begins with you. Whatever you want is what you get. If you want someone to pay you in installments, well and good. No problem with that. So it is okay.
All right. There is also another question. This person is like, Madam, can I do a hire purchasing contract when I'm exchanging goods for goods without money?
So how does that work? Maybe you just need to explain to us. If you're giving a good to someone and then they are paying you in form of a good, are you saying if someone, okay, maybe is paying you, is buying a cow, and then the payment is going to be maybe in form of 30 kilograms of groundnuts. So every week you bring 5 kilos, maybe that's how it can work. Because the point of installment is that you're paying, but little by little. So if you can break down the good into that nature, you bring it, maybe they are in form of kilos, but if it's an animal, okay, maybe there are 10 goats, you can say you bring 1 goat every month, 1 goat. That can also work until they add up to 10 goats. You bring 5 kilos until they add up to 30 kilos. Well and good, as long as you can be able to break down the good to be delivered in those installments, well and good. No problem with that.
All right, Madam. Thank you so much, Madam. Those are the questions. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now the last one is a contract for supply of services. Contract for supply of services. So a contract for supply of services is a contract where someone agrees to perform or use his skill to offer a service in return for a payment. You use your skill to do something, but in exchange, you expect a payment for that. So we have the person we call a supplier. That is the one who's using his skill to do for you something. He's supplying you a service using his skill. Then the other party is the consumer, you who is going to benefit from that service that is being given to you. You're called the consumer. And the consumer has to pay for this service. So that is a contract for supply of services. You have the supplier of services who is going to use his skill, his knowledge to carry out a service which you want in exchange for a payment. So a service can be a professional service, like an auditing service, like a procurement service. So you can have the professional ones. Then you also have the non-professional ones, like someone is going to come and paint for you your house, or someone is going to come and offer you catering services, cook for you, you have a function, someone is going to come and decorate for you. So you have the non-professional services as well. Those are the categories of services we are talking about. Then you who is ordering for this service, you are the consumer of the service. You who wants for you, the consumer. You who wants the dental treatment, you are the consumer. So those are the parties in that contract for supply of services. So maybe let's go down to the detail, down at the bottom of these notes. We look at the contract for supply of services in more detail. Here we go. So, yeah, I think we've explained what the contract for supply of services is. You have the supplier, you have the consumer. Then the characteristics, as we look at the characteristics, we'll be able now to distinguish it with the one for sale of goods. So in the similarities is that in both contracts, you have two parties. And the difference is, who are they? In the contract of sale, you have the buyer and the seller. In a contract for supply of services, you have the supplier, and then you have the consumer. The second similarity in both is consideration. It's a similarity in both contracts. There is consideration. I think, as you've already noted, under the law of, when you're looking at the law of contract, you noted that one of the essential elements for all contracts is that there must be consideration. So in both contracts for sale of goods and supply of services, there is consideration. You cannot obtain a service for free. If you go for a medical service, you pay. If it's a decoration service, you pay. So it is not for free. So in both contracts, there is consideration. Then the difference between the two. The difference between the two is in relation to the subject matter. The subject matter. Subject matter is, what is this contract all about? A contract for sale of goods, like we have seen, is a contract dealing in buying and selling of goods. A contract for supply of services is a contract for the provision of services. You are offering a service. You're offering a service, and the examples I gave you of what the service talks about, but under the law, more of them are listed there. There's banking, insurance, grants, loans, credit, amusement, cultural, entertainment, etc., etc. Whatever service you can think of will fall under this kind of contract. The details and more examples you will read from them. So that is the fundamental difference between the two. And I want to just maybe add on at this point is that many times when you enter into a contract for the supply of a service, it may come in the form of a good. It may come in the form of a good. When it comes in the form of a good, it doesn't mean that the contract you've entered into is a contract for sale of goods. For example, you go to a hospital, you're sick, you're going for a medical service. But when you get to the hospital and they have checked you and they have said you have malaria, we are going to give you tablets, Panadol, chloroquine, whatever it is they give you. Those are goods. When you swallow the chloroquine and the chloroquine reacts with you or to your body and worsens your condition, and you decide to sue the hospital, you are not going to sue the hospital for breach of contract for sale of the goods. Those tablets, you're calling them goods, because you didn't go to the hospital to buy a good. You went to the hospital to obtain a service. But in giving you this service, they gave you goods. But that doesn't make the contract one of sale of goods. It is still a contract for a service. Maybe you want decoration services. You hire a decorator. They come with physical things to decorate, chairs, tables. And when you're sitting on the chair, it falls, breaks, you hurt yourself, you're injured. You're not going to sue the decorator for breaching a contract for sale of goods because of that chair. You're going to sue for breaching a contract for a service because it was a decoration service that was given to you. But in giving you this service, it came with goods, but the contract is not about the good itself. It's about the service that you asked for. So I hope that point has been made, and I hope you have understood it. Is it clear?
Yes, madam.
Okay, formation of a contract. The rest of the things really are more or less what we've already talked about. Formalities for entering into a contract, like we have said over and over again, they are the same. You can enter into a contract in writing. You can enter into a contract by word of mouth. It can be in the form of a data message. It may be implied. The same principles apply. And where the contract involves you paying an amount of money which is above 500,000 shillings, then the contract must be made in writing. So the formalities are standard. They are the same. The terms of the contract, same things again. The terms, we say that the things you talk about, the things you agree upon, which become your obligations. The terms can be express, the terms can be implied. The terms can be conditions, the terms can be warranties. They can be major, they can be minor. So when you're discussing, then you also express yourself on those. If it's a decoration service, as far as the color theme is concerned, you want a particular color. Everything must be purple. So when they come and they are bringing only black things, you can sue. So you discuss all those things, you determine what is important, what is minor, and then you enter into your contract. If anything goes wrong, then you're able to know what to do next, depending on how you categorized your terms. Then the implied terms in a contract for supply of services. Just like we saw in a contract for sale of goods, there are certain implied terms. And likewise, in a contract for services, there are also certain implied terms. Whether you talk about them or you don't, they must apply in your contract for supply of services. And these are: 1, care and skill. The duty of care and skill. Care and skill means you have acquired a certain knowledge regarding something. And so when you're called upon to offer this particular service, you must exercise that knowledge skillfully, carefully, meaning you're not careless, you're not negligent, but you must be careful to make sure that nothing wrong happens. If you're a doctor, you have gone through school, you have learned all these things about being a doctor, medicine. So when a patient comes to you, you must exercise your skill and treat them carefully. Don't cause them more problems because you're just tired. You have attended to 10 patients already. By the time this one comes, you're exhausted, and then you do things in a careless manner, and then the patient worsens or dies even. You will be held responsible for that. So at all times, you must make sure you exercise care and skill in whatever you are doing. So I'm not going to go through the cases. The second one is time for performance. This is an implied term in the contract. The time for performance. Just like we saw the other time, time is a very important term. It's a major term. It's a condition. So the time for the performance must be respected. Where somebody has said, I want catering services and I want you here by 9 a.m. for my function, which is going to be at 4 p.m. You must make sure you go within that time, because if you go late, it means that also the person's program will now be pushed later because of your lack of timekeeping. So you must make sure that you stick to the time that has been provided for in the contract. If no time has been provided, you must make sure that you still perform within a reasonable time, so you don't delay. Then we have consideration, is another implied term. Consideration, you discussed this in the law of contract, you know what it means. So in a contract for supply of services, there must be consideration. It is not something that is going to happen for free. You will not go to a doctor for treatment and then you just smile and walk out of the hospital. You must pay for the service. It is not for free. Then the rest are details which we'll not get into. Then implied term as to the quality of materials used. The quality of materials that are used when you're offering this service should also be of good quality. Like I gave an example, you order for decoration services. The decorator is going to bring chairs and tables. The chairs and tables should be of good quality. They should be strong, durable, long-lasting, beautiful furniture. If somebody brings chairs that are already cracked and they are going to break any minute, that means that they have supplied you with substandard materials. You go to a hospital and they're giving you expired tablets, things like that. That also means they are breaching their duties. So the materials that are being used to offer this service must be high quality, good quality materials. Then duties of the supplier. He has a duty to supply the service. You have contracted him, you have agreed, he has agreed to supply the service. So when the time comes to supply the service, he must make sure he supplies you the service, whatever it is. If a decoration, if it is painting, if it is mechanical, whatever it is, the supplier must make sure he performs that service. The second one is to perform the service with care and skill. We've already talked about this. You must make sure you do everything you do professionally, carefully. Do not cause harm do not cause loss to the other person. You make sure you work in a professional manner, carefully, and not carelessly or negligently causing problems or even death to the person who is consuming this service. Then the other duty is a duty to pay for the service that is now on the part of the consumer. He has a duty to pay for the service. This is the consideration we are talking about. You must give consideration. Don't expect someone to come and cook for you food and then you just smile and say thank you. Or somebody to come and decorate for you and then you say thank you, God bless you, see you. You must pay for the service. It is not for free. Then remedies of the parties in case of breach. If a breach occurs, what is the remedy in that case? One is to sue. First, we begin with the supplier of the service. He can sue for the price. This person has come. You called him, you said, oh, you have a problem with your drainage. The sink is blocked. You cannot flush anything. It can't go down the toilet. You call the plumber comes, works on you. And then for that, there's no money. You must make sure you pay for the service which the supplier has rendered. The supplier can also sue for damages. Can sue for damages where you have changed your mind, you no longer want the service and it has come all the way. And then you say, you know what, not now. You'll be sued for damages for the inconvenience you have put the supplier through to come all the way, only for you to have a change of heart. Then the consumer. What are the remedies of the consumer? So as a consumer, you have the right to sue for failure to supply the service. You've hired a caterer. You have agreed he should appear on this day at this time. On this day at this time, the person is nowhere to be seen. 2 hours later, still nowhere to be seen. You can be sued for failure to come and offer the service. So those are the remedies of the parties in the contract for supply of services. So any questions about that?
So, madam, among the differences, since that in the law of contract of sale of goods, we have 2 parties, and in the one for contract of supply of services, we also have 2 parties. But in the law of supply of services, we can have more than one consumer. Can we say that? And we say that in the differences, can we say that in the law of supply of services, we can have more than one party?
You know, a contract is between 2 people. So here you have the supplier, you have the consumer, and I understand what you're saying, that the consumers are many. For example, you're going to a hospital for treatment. You're not the only one going there. But each one who goes is having his own contract or her own contract. It's not a contract for all the patients together, no. You go as you. You go as you. That is why it's a contract between you, Jen, and the doctor. You're not going with the Jen and all the other people in the village there together, no. You're going as you. So it is between 2 people, the consumer at that particular moment and the supplier. I hope that is better.
Yes, madam.
Okay, any other questions? Do you have any other questions? There was a lady who was supposed to discuss for us something. I don't know if she's around to discuss for us modes of effecting delivery. Is she here? I've forgotten the name.
Excuse me, madam. My question is a bit back under higher purchase. I'm like, what can happen to a higher purchaser if the goods get spoiled, yet he or she is already insolvent?
Okay. What happens where the goods are spoiled and you're failing to pay? Okay. So where the goods are spoiled. Okay. Fahad, please, can you mute your mic? Where the goods are spoiled and you're failing to pay, like we said, of course, whenever a buyer becomes bankrupt, the seller has the right to go and take back his good. But now you're asking what happens if the good is not okay, it's not in a good state as it was before. So in that circumstance, you can still get it back. And then depending on the state in which it is, if the good is spoiled, as a buyer, it is your loss because ultimately the good was going to end up with you. Then also as a seller, you expected that the price would come to you until the last installment is paid, which has not been the case. So in such a case that now you're getting back your good from a buyer and yet the good is not so okay, and then maybe you cannot be able to sell it to somebody else, you may now have to sue the buyer. Okay, you cannot sue someone who's insolvent. What will happen is that you now go to the liquidator, we said, or to the trustee. If this person is a bankrupt, an individual, you go to those people and then you tell them about your contract and explain to them and tell them the buyer has not taken good care of the property. I have had to take it back because he has failed to pay, but the condition in which it is causing a loss to me and I cannot find somebody else to sell it to. And so I'm going to need to repair it or to fix it, and it's going to cost this amount of money. So you go now and make that claim to the liquidator or to the trustee in bankruptcy. And then you wait for them to be able to settle that amount of money that you are demanding. So that would be the option that is available to you as the seller. But again, that will depend on the value of the good, and also how many more installments were remaining. Because you see, when you're paying in installments, you actually don't pay the actual price. You pay a little more because they're adding in interest, because it's like a loan to you. So if you're buying a laptop and the laptop is 1 million, when they compute the 10 installments you're supposed to pay, you may find yourself having to pay about 1.3 because of the way you're paying. So if now the person has paid you 8 installments and only 2 are remaining, surely by this time you have already recovered the full 1 million. Whatever remains is just the interest. So it may not be worth it pursuing a buyer to pay for the damage to the good or things like that. So you can just simply take it as it is and let it be. So it will depend on many things. Yeah, I don't know if that helps in any way.
Madam, Madam,
Yes,
under
please.
the differences between contract of sale and a hire purchase, you talked about the point of insolvency of a buyer, where you said in the hire purchaser loses the good when not fully paid. But what happens to the buyer in case of a contract of sale?
In a sale, we said ownership has already been transferred. Ownership has been transferred to the buyer the moment the sale is entered into. So where the buyer becomes insolvent, that does not affect his or her ownership, because the insolvency or the bankruptcy is coming later after the contract of sale has been entered into. So it doesn't affect your ownership. You still remain the owner of the property, because when the sale was entered into, ownership was transferred. So that does not affect your property. It's not taken away from you. In a hire purchase, it's taken away from you because you are not yet the owner, because you have not yet paid the last installment. I hope that is clear.
Okay, thank you, Madam.
You're welcome.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're moving on to the law of agency.
Excuse me, madam.
Mm.
I'm begging for a pardon or an explanation on this point of sue for damages under the supplier.
Yeah, like I said, when you call the supplier, tell them, please come, I have a problem with my car, for example. It's failing to start. The mechanic jumps onto a border, dashes all the way, comes. And then you say, you know what? I don't need you now, please, just go. We are saying at that point, this supplier can sue you for damages because he has come all the way. He has incurred transport, come all the way to attend to your situation, only for you to tell him, no, I don't need you now. That is what we are talking about.
Okay, thank you, madam.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? This lady who is supposed to be taking us through the chat, is anything there?
Yes, madam, there is. There is a question here stated, what happens when a seller delivers a substandard product from what a buyer has ordered? Yeah.
I think we discussed this. We have been saying that it is the seller's duty to make sure that the goods he supplies are of quality. We talked about this under the implied conditions. The
Yes,
seller must deliver goods of quality. So where the goods which are delivered are not of quality, you have the right to reject them. That one I think has been covered, and I think it was looked at under conditions.
Yes, madam. Madam, there is also another question. Yes.
Yes.
She's like, can you sue a seller to have failed to refund back your money after him or her has failed to deliver the goods of quality? It's
What do
like,
we think?
Mm. Hmm.
It's a condition. We have said it's a condition. A condition is a major term. The seller has a duty to deliver goods of quality. It's one of the terms we looked at. Condition as to quality. A condition is a major term. We've said failure to fulfill a major term leads to the termination of the contract. If you don't want to terminate the contract, you can sue for breach. So if the seller doesn't deliver goods which are of quality, you have the right to reject them. You have the right to sue for the breach. Yeah.
Thank you so much, madam.
Mm.
So far, those are the questions I found in the chat.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So agencies are our next topic. We're going to be starting on that. We are going to be looking at, it's a type of contract, just like we've just seen the previous ones. We are continuing on types of contracts. We looked at the contract for sale of goods, contract of barter, contract of bailment, contract of hire purchase, contract for supply of services, now contract for or of agency. So it's the next thing that we shall be looking at. I don't know, I don't want to start on it now.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.